First of all, I'd like to introduce myself to everyone. I'm Donald Garcia. I'm a board certified psychiatrist. I've been in practice almost 30 years and worked in clinical research for the past 25 years. My practice is currently located in Southwest Austin at Ascension Seton Southwest Hospital. Our group is called Austin Clinical Trial Partners. Our website is just that, www.austinclinicaltrialpartners.com, if you want to look into us a little bit more. I've been involved in research, as I said, for about 25 years, and we've been here in Austin since 2003. We do mostly phase two and phase three clinical trials that are FDA sponsored clinical trials. And what I wanted to talk to today is the idea of exploring clinical trial participation as a viable alternative for access to mental health care and to get help, and to tell you a little bit more about clinical trials uh, and how you might participate in a clinical trial. We'll talk about some of the benefits of participating, including access to care, and we'll talk about some of the potential fallbacks. And then I'll give you some resources at the end, should you be interested in looking into clinical trials, not just in mental health, really, but access to any medical clinical trial for any indication. So I've started giving you my background. My disclosure, I'm not getting paid for this presentation, but clearly I want to present to you the benefits for the purposes of potentially finding study volunteers for our studies. It's very important. There's a growing need for access to mental health care, and there's a role in clinical trials in expanding treatment options. We desperately need patients to help us learn more about some of our treatments, and therefore, uh, this presentation might be helpful as a resource. Hey, Gabrielle, I see that you've just
Hi.
joined.
Yes, hello. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. I've been here presenting to myself as practice. So you've
How
caught
are
me
you
at the very
doing?
beginning. I'm doing great. Thank you. And I appreciate you showing up. I'm recording this so we can present it to other folks later on if they missed it. But I
Okay.
figured, it's just a small presentation and people have busy lives. So I figured folks might forget about it or have other things going on. But I started presenting myself. I'm a board certified psychiatrist here in Austin, just to go over that again. And my practice is here in Southwest Austin at Seton Southwest Hospital. I've been in practice for 30 years. I've done clinical research for 25 years. And this talk is, I'm not getting paid to do the talk. I'm doing the talk to raise awareness about clinical research as a alternative for accessing mental health care, and also self-serving for science. We're looking for people who might be willing to volunteer and help us learn more. So we're just getting started here, and it's very, very informal, as you can tell. It's just you and I. There are a lot of common misconceptions about clinical research. Have you ever been involved in a clinical trial before, Gabrielle?
I have tried and
You've tried.
I've tried and I've never seemed to qualify for
Okay.
whatever the trial is.
And I just want to be careful about any sort of private health information. We don't want to talk about that because obviously that's private. And so I can tell you a little bit about our clinical trials. And then if you want to talk offline with me about details, I'm happy to do that as well. So the misconceptions about clinical trials are that, you know, folks that participate amount to, being lab rats, and that um, there's sort of random experimentations done on folks. Well, it's a very regulated industry. Um, all of our work is regulated by the U.S. FDA, and it's overseen by ethics committees that are assigned to each clinical research study. So I can't bring a patient in and just start gathering whatever sort of data I want in whatever sort of way. It has to be following a protocol, which is much like a recipe that is created by the scientists that are studying whatever we're studying, and we have to follow the protocol. My primary job in all of this is to be the protector of patients and look after their health and well-being as the priority. And then my second priorities is to make sure that I'm identifying the right patients, making sure that the patients meet all the criterion for the study, making sure that they're not harmed or not at risk for participating. So there's a lot of conversation that goes on between me and the study participants or our clinical team with this potential study participants before they come in. There are a lot of types of trials, and FDA trials they're mostly device trials and medication trials, drug trials. We've done some very interesting digital interventions for depression. We did a few years back, where we were looking at a therapeutic application that had been developed by a technology company, and we were looking at people that uh, had depression that were not responding fully to their antidepressant. And they were randomly assigned to either uh, have the uh, study application, which was installed on their cell phone, or what we called a sham application, which just had them do random puzzles and things. The study application was more in lines with certain therapeutic techniques, and the study was 6 to 8 weeks long. And interestingly enough, it set the folks that were assigned to the study application were statistically improved compared to the people that were on the sham application that was just, random puzzles. Um, so it appeared that here we had, for the first time, an application that was approved for treating depression. Well, at least it could be approved based on that study. And that was very exciting. Most of the studies we do, however, are medication trials for general mental health conditions, so depression, anxiety, social anxiety, PTSD, sleep. We do some neurology like uh, fibromyalgia, migraine headaches. We've also done binge eating disorder. Uh, and at any time that you might be interested in what we're doing, you can always look us up on our website at austinclinicaltrials.com. Uh,
Okay.
but again, these are highly regulated trials and they're overseen by ethics committees, which are called institutional review boards. And safety measures are looked at by data review boards that can halt a study at any time if there's any concern about safety in patients. And the phase two and phase three studies that are conducted here, they've already undergone phase one testing in healthy adult volunteers. So there's been a safety check and evaluation of those of that medication to make sure that the drug appears to be safe enough to go on into larger groups of people. And of course, we're collecting safety data as we go. Um, but why would one consider a clinical trial in mental health or any other indication for that reason? And the reasons are fairly straightforward. One has access to innovative treatments that aren't available. We're doing a number of interesting studies here with psychedelic drugs. We have interesting mechanism of action for depression and anxiety drugs that are not yet on the market. And some may turn out to work, some may not work, but that's why we're doing the studies. All the care that you receive during the study period is at no cost. So the study participation typically begins with a 30 to 45-minute informed consent process where you're presented all the details of the study in writing. You ask questions, you make sure it's still something that you're okay with. And then if you volunteer for the study and continue, we'll do a full medical and mental health evaluation at that first visit with laboratory, EKG, physical exam, um, and deep dive into mental health questionnaires. And all of that is available to you. Where that's information we've obtained from you. So I feel like it's something that if you were interested in, we could provide that to you. So laboratory, diagnosis, confirmation, etc. Why else could one participate, and what could one benefit? Well, um, there is a close monitoring by mental health professionals. At our site, we have two board certified medical doctor psychiatrists. We have nurse practitioners and physician assistants and psychologists. And lastly, on this list, but probably not the least, is the contribution to research advancements, which is really important. Um, Addressing concerns, risks, and considerations. Well, anytime you're participating in a study, you want to really be aware of the side effects and the safety measures. When I talk to patients that are interested in a study, we'll usually talk a little bit about the mechanism of the drug. We'll talk about the safety profile of the drug. And if it were a drug that were at any elevated risk to participants, it probably would be proceeding, and I would not likely be carrying out that study here at this site. But it's important to know that, and the informed consent that all subjects will complete prior to participating will detail the side effects and safety measures in the study. People who are participating need to also understand that they're placebo-controlled studies. So many of our studies, for example, there's a 50-50 chance of being put on the study medication or placebo. That means that you might be on a placebo for 6 or 8 weeks and not demonstrate any improvement during that time. And if you were to worsen, my role in the study, the doctor's role in these clinical trials would be to withdraw you if that was appropriate. In most instances, that's what we would do, and then provide you with alternative care after that. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. There is a lot more time commitment, and the expectations for study participants are that they come to all their visits. Uh, our standard clinical trial is usually about 12 weeks long and about 6 to 12 visits during that time. The studies can vary in the way they're designed. Sometimes the visits are not all done here in the office. Uh, there might be remote visits in between study visits, but there are some studies in which every study you have to come here. And that first screening visit where you go over the informed consent and have the full medical and mental health evaluation, it can take up to 4 or 5 hours. So it's definitely more time than you would spend at your average doctor visit. The follow-up visits can be a few hours as well. And just asking questions when you're inquiring about the study is important, just so you know how much time commitment there might be for you to participate. Um, as a participant, everyone has the right to be fully informed of all the risks and benefits before they agree, and the ability and right to withdraw at any time. This is what I say is much different from being a lab rat. A lab rat, you don't really aren't able to you aren't able to consent, and you aren't able to withdraw when you get tired of the study. But here, if you were to want to leave the study in the middle of the study for any reason, then you're not signing a contract or an agreement that binds you. We would like our patients who withdraw from studies or are interested in withdrawing, we would like them to come in for a final visit so we can do all the safety check and collect the medication and do enough assessment to determine that everything's okay and they're in the same shape they were, if not better than when they came in. We would hate for someone to just withdraw from the study and not get a safety check with labs and maybe find out several weeks later that there might be an issue, which rarely there is, but it's always the safest thing to do to come in and have that final visit before you withdraw from the study. Um, Here at Austin Clinical Trial Partners, because our studies are in folks who are having mental health issues and therefore are considered a vulnerable population, we provide 12 weeks of no-cost transitional care when a study is over. That care can all be done remotely by telemedicine, but at the end of a study, we will see where each patient is in terms of feeling better, worse, or the same. We'll talk about options that might be beneficial, and then we can implement that strategy and work with them to find a long-term provider during that 12 weeks so that at the end of the 12 weeks, there's someone to continue with. And we're building a network. We're working really hard right now to build a network within the community of practitioners who can take on patients as soon as that 12-week period is over and offer various um, programs and assistance for ongoing care. So that bridges that all the aftercare, transitional care, we call it aftercare and transitional care. It bridges the gap between the research and real world care, which often people require.
Right.
So how do you find the right clinical trial? There's so many different trials, and they're almost like puzzles in the types of symptoms and symptom presentations that they require. Not everyone with a totally legitimate depression, for example, would be eligible for every one of our depression studies. They all differ in um, the group that they're looking at. The studies are designed to try to, as best as possible, determine if the drug might be helpful. So sometimes the population is pared down to very simple terms. For example, in a depression study, we may be looking for people that have no longer than 2 years episode of current depression or who have been on a medication at a certain dose for a certain period of time. So if you were to be interested in a study and not qualify, it may not mean that you're not depressed or you're not deserving of care. It just means that you're not fitting that specific inclusion, what we call inclusion and exclusion criterion for the study. Sometimes the design of the study is meant to protect patients who might be at risk. There's some studies, for example, where the drug may not have been tested in male reproduction, and so we're not going to put any males in the study due to that potential risk. There might be other times where we're looking at uh, uh, people with anxiety, a generalized anxiety, and we may not want patients with concomitant or concurrent panic disorder, for example, that might make it difficult to tell if the generalized anxiety is getting better because there's such an overlap in panic and generalized anxiety symptoms. So when you're looking for clinical trials, clinicaltrials.gov is a government website, which is it's a very expansive list of all clinical trials that are being conducted across the country. And um, are you familiar, Gabrielle, with clinicaltrials.gov?
No, I've never been to clinicaltrials.gov.
If you can you see my screen here?
Well,
I'm trying to access clinicaltrials.gov. Are you able to see my screen with the clinicaltrials.gov
Yeah.
web page? So let's say, for example, um, I wanted to do a study, panic disorder. I could type panic disorder. Um, and if I was looking specifically, I don't know, I don't think we're going to find any, but if I wanted to look at a psychedelic drug, I might type in psychedelic for panic. And then I'll just leave it like this and I can search. And it comes up with every study, in this case, just the one, psychiatric disorders. This one's probably not a good one, so I'm going to go back and just look at depression and um, psychedelic and see what shows up. So here we have 105 studies that show up, and you can then narrow it down to studies that are recruiting or not yet recruiting. And then, it gets even more in depth. You can look at the phases of the study here. So let's say we want to look at a phase 2 or phase 3. An interventional study is what they typically refer to a drug trial as. And then if we're looking at an industry, which means it's like a pharmaceutical company is running that trial, we can do these. And here we have now a list that's filtered down to just phase 2 and phase 3 trials of depression um, with uh, psychedelic drugs. And we can click on one, for example, and it will give us the study overview.
Okay.
Um, it will give the study contacts and locations. And then it typically has the inclusion and exclusion criteria, not an all-inclusive list of every one of the criteria, but the high points of the ages and the diagnosis and the detail here. For example, there's a BMI listing, and if there's hypertension, it has to be well controlled. Patients have to be able to refrain from smoking in the study. And then inclusion criterion are criteria or symptoms that the participant needs to have present to be included into the study. And exclusion criterion are
Wow.
traits or characteristics that would make you ineligible. So if you were diagnosed with schizophrenia or had a recent suicide risk within 12 months, or donated blood or plasma within 4 weeks, for example, any of these would exclude you from the study. And there's just, more information about the study design. There's um, information about the drug. You can copy and paste this into your browser or chat GPT, and it will find you links and tell you more about that particular drug. It shows you how they're measuring the depression with these different scales. And um, sometimes they actually list where all the centers are that are participating, but there's usually a contact information I'm scrolling fast up here. But there's usually like a contact information, like a study manager and a phone number. If you were interested, you could ask them, hey, is this being conducted in the Austin area, for example? So um, clinicaltrials.gov is a good resource. I mean, you can put bunions or seizure disorder or any sort of medical condition in there. And now we'll see if Dr. Garcia can figure out how to get back where I was.
There you
I
go.
think we're back to the slides. So university mental health research centers often conduct clinical research. There's a number of studies in Austin, and I'm going to give you some links at the end of this in about 4 more slides that you can maybe screenshot. And if you're interested in looking into the options at University of Texas and then other healthcare providers. Usually clinicaltrials.gov will have every site listed that's conducting a clinical trial that's part of the um, FDA, and even beyond FDA trials. So we've talked about this a little bit. The benefits of a clinical trial are that you may get better. The risks are that you may not, and you may get worse. Typically, we don't see people getting worse. But it can happen if someone's depression is sort of already starting. For example, depression or anxiety is starting a trajectory of getting worse, and they come in and maybe they're assigned to the placebo, and maybe they're assigned to the study drug and it's not working. And again, the studies are double blind, meaning neither the study staff nor the patients know what they're receiving. We don't know what group you're getting. We know what lot number it is, but the computer that dispenses medication knows. So uh, it's sort of like the blind Pepsi challenge back in the old days where they had the what's better, Coke or Pepsi commercials, and they blindfolded people and they had them taste each one, and they would then be unbiased and they would say, oh, I like number one or number two. So in this way, we're blinded and we don't know what you get. So we are not biased or inclined to rate you one way or score your improvement one way or another, unconsciously based on what group you're in.
Mhm.
Um, I mentioned the typical duration of the studies are about 8 to 12 weeks. I really like clinical trials. I like conducting clinical trials that have long-term open, what we call long-term open label extensions. And that would be an option at the end of the 8 to 12 week double blind placebo controlled study for everybody to start the medication and actually be on the medication for sure. That's what open label means. There's no placebo. And that the open label studies can go on for 6 weeks to 12 weeks. I'm sorry, 6 months to 12 months, excuse me, 6 months to 12 months. So people might have an opportunity in a clinical trial that has an open label extension to get on the study medication eventually for sure. And then if it's working, be on it for a half year to a year. Um, in clinical trials, the costs of participating are covered. We don't bill you, we don't bill your insurance company. I'm paid to manage study patients and make sure that they're taken care of and to do well for the study in terms of ensuring that the proper patients are in, that the data is entered correctly, and that sort of thing. And typically, all of our study participants are paid a stipend that can be anywhere between 100 and $250 a visit for time and travel depending on the study. Every study has different payments. Studies are often different for the payments are often different for each visit. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in a clinical trial to, when they're talking to the doctor or the site staff, to ask about payment, how much is paid at each visit, and what's the total amount I would get if I finish the study. Well, after the trial, we've talked about it. At the end of this, the last visit is usually a safety visit where um, we're, well, the second to last visit is typically the last visit you would be taking medication, where we redraw, having trouble speaking here at 5:30. We're redrawing blood work. We're doing another physical exam. We're making sure that everybody is healthy and that there have been no changes and metabolic profiles or height or weight or your heart function or any of your labs. Make sure that you're doing just as well when you finish the study as when you came in. And then there's a final study visit, which is usually a week or 2 weeks after stopping study medication. At that final visit is when we offer the aftercare, and we'll start talking to you about options, and we can start you on different medication or different treatment at that time. Um, so final thoughts. I think I've sort of articulated how clinical trials can sometimes be a stepping stone to long-term care. Um, Not all groups will offer the transitional care period, but it is an opportunity to access treatment options that aren't available to other people. It's important that as a participant, you research thoroughly before enrolling, ask questions and seek guidance, and feel free to ask the site to send you a digital copy of the informed consent document before you decide whether you want to come in and participate. If you're interested in looking at that before you come in, just to double check, that's your right as a study participant. So I wanted to open the floor for questions from our very large audience today. Um, and and then I also wanted to put this last slide up, which is um, uh, our website, the clinicaltrials.gov website. UT has a healthy mental health research program, and there's a link there to their various studies and programs. Um, it's hard. UT is so large, it's hard to like filter down whether I don't even think there's like one access point for people that would be interested in research. So there are like three different websites that I found here to access opportunities, mostly in mental health, and those are all here. The last one, Dr. Fonzo does clinical research with psychedelics at the UT Dell Psychedelic Research Center, and so their current studies in psychedelic research there on the last one. Um, and so that's it.